Friends, I have not done a garden video now for a little bit. We got through the middle of summer and now we are heading into beautiful fall weather. You know, it somehow has been just like perfect weather going into fall, and I've really been enjoying that. And what that means is it's a great time to plant. I think we think of planting only happening in the summer, right? No, fall is a great time to plant if you can find the plants. So today we're doing Mom's entry, which you can see one half of the entry behind me. So I live about not even a quarter of a mile, maybe an eighth of a mile across the road from my mom. And this is where I grew up. And this summer in July, I had these entryway columns installed, which I'll talk about those here in a minute, what that entailed. But then today what we're gonna do is do a little bit of planting just in front of them. I'm still wanting to assess and think about what I wanna plant behind these cornerstones here, but I'm really excited about what I'm planting in front of them. And I really also wanna show you how it's gonna go with the bed I planted earlier this year too. So here at the entryway, we have two sides that look exactly the same, and I can span over here and you can see it too. So what, years ago, probably 10 years ago, I was shopping at an architectural salvage place and I found these outside by themselves. It actually really wasn't an architectural salvage place, but it had these two pieces, which are, I think, a cast limestone with maybe I don't know, maybe even a terracotta glaze over the top. But what you can see is they're beautiful pieces, finials, from an old building. And I think they were an old building in Des Moines, Iowa, actually, the capital city, because that is where I purchased them and that's what they said. And for years, I'd been wanting the right place to put them, but knew they needed to be somewhat prominent, and they're gonna need a sturdy, solid base, which is what these columns are all about. So what I did was I had the local landscape company that I love to use. I worked with them to it took me a while to figure out for sure how I wanted it to look. More formal, less formal. It just kind of was a little bit of me really having to decide and put my head around. But what I ended on was, I always knew I wanted some form of limestone. And so this is cut wall stone on the two sides that are flanking these corner pieces. And it's the same wall stone I use further on down in Mom's yard to make a low wall. And I like to keep it somewhat natural. Limestone is native to Iowa. It's quarried in Iowa. And I really like that because it ages and patinas a little bit over time. And it looks to me correct in the landscape. It looks really good. So what we did was construct two really short walls. They're only about, I think if I remember right, 5 foot out. I'd have to measure again to be sure. And they're flanked off a cornerstone. And that was where it became a little bit tricky in the design. I at first wanted one solid limestone corner. That was quite pricey, and to me, just not quite worth the price either. So instead, the quarry already has these pieces that they cut all the time for either sometimes parking lots, curbs, sometimes seats, and two stacked on top of each other created a great wall. It was like over half of the cost, and it still made the look that I really wanted. So that created a plinth, really, for this finial on top to set on both sides, and I stair-stepped the two sides off so it felt a little bit more organic. So when we step back, you can see it really has a nice presence when you drive in. I did have them then edged in a limestone bed to create just a square around them. And that's what we're gonna be talking about today. So you can see right here, they have just, to me, a great organic feeling. And I know eventually, yes, I've already placed a few pumpkins just because, you know, feeling the season, why not? Anytime I have something new, I like to imagine how I can kind of just enjoy it in the season. So I was getting some pumpkins in the other day and I set them here. So eventually behind, I'm gonna want something kind of tall, architectural with height, but I'm not focusing on this year. I'm gonna leave that for next year. Today what I'm focusing on is the two beds that create the corner in front of these walls. You're gonna see here, Kip is helping me, of course, just sitting like the perfect dog. By the way, if you've ever wondered, my mom's house, obviously right here, I live right there, so it's just over and down the road. But what I'm doing is focusing here in front on some perennials that are gonna be easy maintenance, need no watering once they're established, and give some color. We've never really had color at this entry point. We had some old large shrubs that were here. They didn't really bloom. They didn't really do anything. And so we want a little bit of variety, and that's what we're working on today. So in this area already, I had reseeded here recently when everything had to be ripped out. So if you see some grass that hasn't been mowed, that is why, because we're just letting it kind of grow a little bit. But what I first did was strip back all of this mulch I did. Now, you can see here this mulch I put down right away because this was gonna fill up with weeds. It was just open soil, and all that's gonna do is start having weeds grow if you don't do anything with it. So by putting mulch on it right away when this was done, since I didn't know what I wanted to plant yet, that suppressed those weeds until I was ready. So I scraped it back best I could with a rake, and now we can plant right in here. And by the way, I'm also gonna do an impromptu tour here with this when I'm done of the bed we planted this spring, my mom and I together, if you remember that big new perennial bed. So you can see how really they go together because it's just beyond this wall. And I want them to be cohesive, but also a little different, but be able to kind of look good together. So the first thing I always think of if ever I'm planting any bed, and you're gonna know this if you followed me, is the soil health. You always wanna be able to add to the soil when you can. And the easiest time to do it is before anything is planted and when that bed is just open and empty. So I'm always gonna start with some good organic compost. You know I love to use a Spone that's organic, and I use lately the Land and Sea compost, and I love it. It's light, it's airy, can act as a mulch if you want it to, but I like to work it in with the soil. So what I'm gonna do is just spread this right on top. You can see I've already kind of laid out one side, but this is now the side I have not laid off. And what I like to do is put it right on top and then rake it around. And then what this does is as I dig each hole, it mixes it in with the soil. You know, anytime, whether you have, I live in Southeast Iowa, and I have really nice black loamy soil, but that does not mean that I don't need to add to the soil or add more organic, beautiful matter if I can. So that's what I'm doing. This is kind of the first way to make sure you can build your soil. And healthy soil, by the way, with good compost, with organic material, not only does it have more nutrients to help the plants, it will actually retain more moisture over time, help that root structure grow stronger. It's wonderful. Once all that beautiful compost is laid out, I want to talk about the plants. Now you can see I started placing some, but let's just go look here. So this is actually this was the first time this year, and I think only the second time total I've ordered plants online. Now, I will always buy local when I can. The reason is I'm doing this later in the season, great time to plant, but you don't always have the best selection, especially if you need certain amounts of each plant. So for these, I ordered them, and honestly, they came beautiful. The one thing to note, usually when you order plants late in the season, just remember, they've been growing all year, and these even had a note on them letting you know, but they were cut back at one point. So you can see since they're perennials, they grew a lot, maybe even flowered, had to be cut back, but now are fleshing out lots of new beautiful growth. So as long as you know that, just remember, they're perennials, they're gonna look great next year, they're gonna grow a lot, and that's the best part. So some of them you know of because I've planted them a lot. Cat's pajamas, one of my favorite Nepeta. It does stay smaller, and I like that. I don't want to use an older variety like Walker's Low here because it would just get too big. Walker's Low gets multiple feet tall and wide and can lay over. Cat's pajamas, it has the same bloom cycle. If you want it to rebloom, it's best to cut it back, but it stays more compact and it does not reseed, or I haven't found it to, which I really like. Then we have a new black-eyed Susan for me. I have not had this little gold star. Super excited about it because it stays small. It's like 1.5 feet tall and wide, which as you can see here, we have a low wall. I don't want any type of rudbeckia to take over. So I want something low. This to me is the perfect example. Now, I don't know if this is gonna reseed. I honestly would kind of love if it did reseed, but I'm not expecting it to. Sometimes with, you know, hybrids like this, they don't. So we'll just have to kind of wait and see. And then the normal Millennium, Allium. This one, I will say, it's not supposed to, but I do find it reseeds, so just take note. I do notice this reseeding in my yard and garden. It's not aggressive necessarily, it's easy to pull out the little starts, but it is just something to take note. So what I'm doing is picking things that bloom slightly at different times. Cat's pajamas, they're kind of a late spring bloom. They bloom for quite a few weeks. Later on in the summer, the Allium take over. Late summer into fall, the Rudbeckia here, this little black-eyed Susan, it will be blooming all through. So I'm trying to pick something that will make sure to have color all through. And remember, there will be seed heads left on all of them. They'll have winter interest. It will be kind of a beautiful, natural combination. So what I do, I don't always draw everything out. Actually, I hardly ever draw everything out. I just don't. I don't enjoy it. You know what I enjoy is just coming out and laying things out. So that's what I'm doing. You know, it's your home garden. You can do what you want to do. There are no rules other than making yourself happy and enjoy it, and hopefully the amount of work you want to work with. So all what I'm doing is laying them out, usually in odd numbers. Sometimes though, and this might be one of those times, I don't follow that rule. What I'm roughly doing is thinking of my sizes as I go. So you can always look at the tags if you don't know the size to get them, but you just want to space them thinking of how you want them to grow together. I want all these perennials to eventually touch each other and really kind of be able to really fit in and hold tightly into each other, because that to me always helps suppress more weeds when things are growing closer together. And I'm also trying to make sure, which I didn't do just there, each side looks somewhat the same. So at the moment, how I'm laying it out is I am doing a little gold star rudbeckia at the corner, which I think will be really pretty, some Millennium allium in front of each column, because they get about the tallest usually. They can in time get some nice size to them, like just about 20, sometimes some of mine actually probably just 18 to 20 inches. So they should be close to the rudbeckia. Those two should be about the same since it's a little one. These stay lower, which I like in front of a lower wall. And then we'll on the corner again put some more rudbeckia, just so we're spacing out that beautiful yellow color. So in total, I have about 22 plants around each side coming into the corner. To make my life easier, I'm gonna use an auger, because you can not have to bend over as far, not have to work as hard to dig. And when your soil is nice like this is, look how easily that works in with no problem. With all the holes dug here on one side. Now in the fall, I am not going to overly fertilize something because it's going to be drawing in very soon. It's going to want to go dormant here by October. We always have usually our first hard freeze sometime in that month. And so that's when everything's going to go dormant. But I do want to feed the roots because they're going to stay active for a while, sometimes into December, depending when our ground gets cold enough. So I'm going to put Biotone right into the hole from Espoma. That's going to help make sure those roots have what they need so they can have the nutrition they need without over fertilizing that top growth. That's not what we're worried about here. Same as any time I plant, when I'm going through, if they have tight roots, and some of these, I wanted you to see a closer look here, some of these have really tight roots, so usually cat's pajamas, any type of nepeta are I don't feel bad taking off the bottom third of that. I always like to think it activates or stimulates those roots to want to push out, and if they're too drawn in, if they're too encircling themselves, it can be hard for them to branch out. So I like to do that. And honestly, since we're in cooler weather, these roots are going to have a really easy time adjusting. And now I'm just finishing up with the Millennium allium and then that beautiful rudbeckia right in the corner. Both sides of just this first side of the entryway are done. Now you can see I put the mulch back best I could. I see a spot here, I did not get that much. In a perfect world, we would have done this all at the same time, but I wanted to suppress those weeds, so having mulch on it right away was important. And it was a small area, so pushing it back really didn't matter. So I've spaced things out that when they grow, they're really gonna kind of eventually just touch each other and be a mass of texture, foliage, but also color, which is what I'm really, I think, gonna love. And I know Mom's gonna love because she loves so much of the color that we put in the bed we planted together this year. So this is gonna be a really fun one to watch next year because perennials, they get till their full height almost in less than a year. So next year for sure, since these are in now, they are gonna be full of color. So I just have one more side to do, and then we're gonna take a tour of that big bed we put in this spring. Now I know some of that was sped up, but in all honesty, I just looked at my watch. This took a total of 1 hour for both sides. So while it sounds like 44 plants is gonna take quite a while, it really doesn't. And you know what's great? Perennials now are good to go. So when you plant in the fall, I think there's pros and cons of every season. But when we plant in the fall, you don't have to worry about the scorching heat or that dry, hot wind really blowing through a lot. You do want to watch, of course, water still. So don't get trapped by thinking, oh, it's cool out, I'm sure it's fine. No, these are small plants without a lot of roots. Those roots aren't going to go into the soil too much right away. So you definitely need to water them until they're established. And here in Iowa, that could be into November. That could some years be into December if we have a really warm fall and into winter. So these though, what I will do next spring, so what I do with all perennials, I will just cut them off, leave the foliage so it composts in. Otherwise, they will be beautiful, foliage, and then soon enough it'll be blooming. But what I want to do is now take you over and do kind of a quick little garden tour. I think areas need to come together. And I think when you're thinking of planting a new area, you want to make sure it goes with all the other garden areas you have. So we're coming upon this new bed that Mom and I put in beginning of June or end of May. If you remember, the overall goal is to eventually hide these electrical boxes that have to be there. That fringe tree, which is small right now, it's going to do a lot of the work eventually by being, 15, hopefully 20 foot tall eventually, and just really kind of encasing those. But what I hope to get across is showing how many months has this been? If let's say it was planted in the end of May, June, July, August, we're going into September in the 4 months. That's all the growth this has had. Now, granted, we have had good rain this year, but all these are drought tolerant perennials and they have all established themselves quite quickly. And look, now this is Goldstrom Rudbeckia here. It's going to be a different variety from the Rudbeckia I just planted, which is that little gold star. This though, look how much color it's adding already. So let's take a closer look. So as we come down this bed, you're gonna remember I did a mixture of grasses, both tall and short. So we have feather reed grass that will eventually get much bigger in the back. We have Hamlin grass here in front, and then we have Rudbeckia. The one thing that's taking a little bit longer this year is the sea holly. So I wanna show you here, you can see blooms still on one. What happened was early on in the season, it got a lot of blooms and then they bent over and broke. So now finally what's happening is new plants are coming from, I really should have clipped off those blooms and I didn't. I let them grow. So now you can see though where they're dying back, new little plants are coming. So I'm not worried. I know they're gonna fill in and eventually they're gonna really be a nice big sea of color, but it just is gonna take a little bit longer to actually get there. So that's the one thing that took a little bit longer this year, but everything else, I mean, look at the Goldstrom Rudbeckia. Look at these grasses. I love that foliage. Now behind them are salvia, which will get taller. The liatris really filled in this year. It was a beautiful purple color. The caradonna salvia here in front. What I did was I intermixed back and forth different things at different times so you get a sea of texture coming down this whole bed. And I just want to back up a little bit so you can really see from a distance already all of that beautiful color coming down. And then it repeats. So the two stone pieces you're seeing there are architectural salvage pieces that I'm using as benches. They're a red sandstone and they're just the perfect height to sit and just have as a bench, and they have that beautiful kind of engraving and carving on the front. And then we have more Rudbeckia down here. So just like some over at my house, but some different perennials here too, it's a mix. And what I'm gonna do in the spring is just use my push mower that self-mulches, meaning it keeps everything under it and chops it into small pieces and then just drops it. So it all is just gonna act as a compost. I should say we have penstemon in here too. I don't remember if it's Dark Towers or Midnight Masquerade maybe, but everything is really filling in, and that's just within a few months. So imagine next year when everything now has its root structure and goes into the next year with all that growth ready to happen. I think it's going to be quite a year of just tremendous color down here, and I'll make sure to show you. Mom already has been mentioning how what she loves is from the house, from windows in her family room. She can just see all of this color. And that was really the point, because before there was nothing here against that row of arborvitae that are eventually going to shield the yard from the road. There was nothing to stop your eye. And so now this beautiful bed is just really doing a lot of beauty out here. And what I like now is you're going to have mimicking colors a little bit. You're going to have purple from both the catmint and the millennium allium, but you're also going to have that Rudbeckia color at the front entry. So we'll have kind of a repeating idea on color, but different foliage. There's no nepeta in this bed. There's no allium in this bed. So we'll have variances, which I really like, but still be close together. In all honesty, as I've been sitting the rest of the year looking at this bed, I've been thinking how nice it would be to connect this bed to the front entry, because it's really only another like 30 foot maybe. So as I'm walking, you can see as I walk, look how pretty it would be just to connect that bed up here to that new entry. Maybe next year, we'll see. So I hope this invigorates you to see that you can plant in the fall as long as you can find the plants. Maybe we can get nurseries more excited to get fall plants in, because it's a great time to plant, right? Anytime, spring, summer, fall, I'm always thinking of planting and what I can get to make sure we can always keep up and beautify the areas we want, amend the soil, help the soil. Even if you have rich, dark soil like I do, amending it will always help it be better soil. Make sure those roots have what they need, which is what I did with Biotone. And then just sit back and watch it grow, which is what I'm gonna do next year. And I think when I plant, I'll do a video on what I plant behind these columns next year. You're gonna see quite a bit of color. So always share this video, like it, let others know about it. That's the joy of gardening. We can share it around.